Gateway Station. Come in, Gateway Station. This is Hallstrom.
And Rohrbacher.
Captains of the USCSS podcast requesting permission to dock.
USCSS podcast, you are clear. Please proceed to docking arm 7.
Kenny, man, we're finally going back to Earth. We're going home.
Man, honestly, I gotta say, it's about fucking time. I mean, I'm really gonna be glad to see that place because, I mean, hell, you know, we've already fucking been everywhere else in the damn galaxy.
Everywhere. A lot of places more than once, too. We kind of just kept
True.
going in a circle there, didn't we? Jesus. LV-223, right?
Planet 4.
LV-426. Then we went over to where Sevastopol was that KG-348?
Yep, 348.
Yeah.
And then after that, I believe we went over to see the remains of the Marion.
Sure.
At, hell, where was that? What was that planetoid called?
LV-178, I think.
178. Yep, that's it. And then, man, I believe we actually made not quite a U-turn, but like a big loop, and somehow ended back up at 426 again somehow.
I know. It's several times. Mostly. And then back to 223. Briefly. Oh, Tobler 9, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. We stopped by there for a little while, too, didn't we? Shit, damn.
Perseus 9.
Yeah, we've been everywhere, haven't we? Damn.
Yeah, that other planet. We never made it to Origai 6, though.
Yeah, unfortunately. You know, I guess we'll never see what that golden planet was like, supposedly, will we?
It's too far away.
Yeah. Who knows?
I don't blame them for stopping at Planet 4. I bet they blame themselves, though. No, wait. No, they don't. They're all dead.
They sure are.
But this is it, man. We're getting back to Earth. What is the first thing that you're going to do when we hit dirt?
Man, you know, I've actually been thinking about this for a while. You know, we've been gone for so long. Honestly, man, I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to eat an entire damn pan of lasagna. How about you? What are you going to do?
Are you going to eat the pan as well?
Depending on how much sauce and pasta it has on it,
Sure.
Maybe. Like, you know how long it's been, dude?
You know, my feelings are, why use a separate pan? Just make a lasagna pan that's made out of lasagna, and then you get double lasagna.
Man, that is a genius idea. I'm going to actually have to write that down.
That's how you make your fortune back on Earth. Sweet. We have been cleared for docking. When I get down to Earth, I'm hitting the mini golf course.
Oh, hell yeah.
I'm not even good at mini golf. I'm actually pretty bad at it, but man.
To be honest, so am I, so I hear you.
But you know, not getting any better out here in space. Time to hit the mini golf course.
That's true.
Hey, Engineer Carissa, are you back there? Hello? What are you going to do when we get on Earth? Engineer Carissa?
Hello, Carissa.
You know, we actually haven't heard from her in a while. I don't even think she knows we're almost back at Earth.
Yeah, we should probably go, like, you know, tell her, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm gonna go check on her. I'll be right back.
Wait, hold on. Before you leave, wait.
What's up?
Check this out.
Whoa.
Look out here. What the hell's up with all these derelicts that are, like, in orbit around Earth? Where the hell these come from?
That's a lot of space junk.
Yeah, maybe you should wait to go talk to her, because, you know, coming in through all this, I might need that, you know, second pair of hands on the steering wheel for us to be able to get through this.
Sure, two wrongs sometimes make a right.
That's right.
Wait, is that a Coast Guard ship out there?
I think it is, actually. Like, looking at those markings, that kind of does look like a Coast Guard.
That's a Coast Guard.
A Coast Guard ship doing out
here? Is
here?
this the coast now? Is space the new? I guess space is the new coast, right?
Oh man, Just imagine how terrible Earth looks now if the coast is out in space.
Jesus.
Yikes!
They're sending out a probe. It looks like they're checking out a freighter called the Junket. Are they gonna?
Yeah, from here, I'm pretty sure that's what the name is. I can't tell for sure, but I think so.
Are they like Are they gonna probe us?
Oh man, I hope not. Oh fuck! That was awesome. That probe just blew that thing up remotely. That kicks so much. They were not doing that last time we were here.
This is the Coast Guard's job. The Coast Guard's job now is to blow up ships in space.
Apparently, but damn, what a job. Maybe I should sign up for the Coast Guard when we land. Shit.
I hope they don't probe us. Hold on. Something. That probe's coming back. Something's on top of that probe, dude.
You see it too?
What is?
It looks like it's moving.
Kennelly, we're fine. I just called you Kennelly.
You sure did.
I'm trying to say, Kenny, we're finally talking about some classic Aliens comics.
Oh, when you say classic, it's pretty much as classic as it gets, because I believe there was one alien comic ever released before this came out.
That was the illustrated Alien movie adaptation, right?
Yep.
Yeah. This is huge. Like, I don't think people, I'm sure a lot of people do. Fans certainly do, but I don't know if general public knows how huge these comics were for the franchise in general.
Oh yeah, no joke. I was reading earlier that they said that this comic had to go through 6 printings because
Yes.
it was such a huge smash success that everyone was just clamoring for it nonstop. It was a massive success.
Yeah, originally printed as Aliens, then later when they made more as Aliens Book 1, and finally Aliens Volume 1, Outbreak. This is a 6-issue limited comic series published in 1988 by Dark Horse Comics. This was like a massive, this launched, I think it was like Dark Horse's one of their biggest successes, and it launched like the entire Aliens kind of expanded universe. Their whole comic line for sure, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
This book is responsible for the years and years of Dark Horse Aliens comics we got, the Alien versus Predator comics. I believe this is also responsible for launching a lot of like the novels.
Mm-hmm.
Because this storyline was adapted into a novel, Aliens Book 1, Earth War, I believe it's called, Earth Hive.
A lot of I think actually all of like the early Aliens novels were just adaptations of arcs from the comic book, and this was the first one of both the comics and of the novels.
It was, and it was a book that my older brother owned. He owned the trilogy, the same trilogy adapted from Verheiden's trilogy. And I actually have a copy of Earth Hive. It's in my storage unit, but I know that I still have it. I might have the other 2 as well, Nightmare Asylum and Female War. But we're not talking about those versions. We're talking about this comic book version of this story.
We sure are.
I'm not sure if we touched... I mean, I know that you and I talked about it. I'm not sure it stayed in the episode because it was kind of a mess. This story is a direct sequel to Aliens.
It certainly is. It was originally created to be, then it wasn't, now it alternate universe is.
Right. Because at one point, the characters in this story, Hicks and Newt, were changed to Wilkes and Billy, 2 separate characters, because a little movie called Alien 3 came along, right?
Yep.
So that was the version that was the Wilkes and Billy version was the version that was available for a very, very long time, right? Like that was what was reprinted in the Dark Horse omnibuses, and originally like they sort of quote unquote remastered this story into the Wilkes and Billy ones in full color and released those as trade paperbacks.
I'm not entirely sure. I'm just remembering from the article that I skimmed earlier.
Yes.
But I believe they said that they changed it in like 93 or 94 after Alien 3 came out, of course.
Right.
And then the version that had Wilkes and Billy was the only version that they released for something like 24 years or something.
Something like that.
And I think the original pre-edit version of it was not released again by Dark Horse till something like, I think, 2016 or right around there. So for over 20 years, the edited version of this comic was the only version that was publicly available.
I believe it was 2018 because it was released in its original form in black and white as a 30th anniversary edition. Does that math check out?
Yes, because it originally came out in 88. So
yes. Yeah. And that is that is not the first time I read this story. I read the Wilkes and Billy version first, but I read the original version in 2018 in that 30th anniversary edition, the digital copy, which is what I started reading it in now. But that version has the theory on alien propagation or whatever is kind of cut into it. So for consistency, I instead purchased digitally the 6 individual issues that Marvel is selling on Comixology.
And I believe those are the original versions, but colorized.
They
correct?
are the original versions, but colorized. So I read this kind of half in black and white and then half in color.
The Marvel version of it, just for the listeners out there, the Marvel version of it is the version that I read because I finally had an excuse to bust out my hardcover Aliens Original Years Omnibus number 1.
Fancy.
And so I read that, which is the original Hicks and Newt version, but it's colorized like the 30th anniversary version was.
Right.
But unlike the version you read, the theory of propagation is not edited into this story.
Right.
In this publication, it's a separate comic that's somewhere else in the table of contents.
Yeah. So if you want to track this down without buying the omnibus, all 6 issues are on Comixology as Aliens 1988 to 1989. It is not listed as Aliens Outbreak in there. It's again, it's a little confusing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
For a story that's been reprinted so many times that was changed because they wanted to keep their stories in canon with the movie universe, which they obviously couldn't do with Hicks and Newt buying it at the beginning of Alien 3. Something that Mark Verheiden really was bummed about, apparently, the writer of this
I would
story.
believe it.
Because he was like, man, my comic books were canon, and then suddenly they weren't, you know, and I loved those characters, and it felt pretty unceremonious to kill them in the opening credits. All feelings that I honestly share with him.
And, like, I understand why they did it, but what that means is that they've now created, like, several years of sequel comic to Alien about 2 brand new characters that nobody's ever seen or gives a shit about anymore, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but I suppose they did what they thought they had to, I guess. You know?
And, like, they really are sort of one-for-one substitutions where Wilkes was a Marine that encountered xenomorphs on a mission where Billy was one of the only survivors of. Like, the story, it's exactly this. It's kind of like what we were talking about, how the Alien original screenplay comic could be a story about a different alien set in the same universe with just a similar series of events. They literally, that's literally what they did with Wilkes and Billy. Like,
yeah, they changed the names of these characters, but like that's the only change they made. They're otherwise exactly the same as Hicks and Newt.
Right. And they changed, I think, the planet it happens on to a colony on Rim as opposed to Acheron, right? LV-426.
And yeah, that's pretty much, I think that might actually be the only changes they made.
Yeah. So again, just for clarity, we are reading the original version. We are reading the Hicks and Newt version of this, which is available in the Marvel Omnibus, the original year's Omnibus, and as individual issues, at least on Comixology. None of this is sponsored content, by the way. We're just fans.
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's some comic book stores out there, there's original issues out there. Maybe you can still find that 30th anniversary hardcover somewhere. I have a digital version of it because it was like remarkably on sale for Alien Day one year.
I got you.
I think
it was like 90% off or whatever. I got you.
Something absurd. Back when Comixology used to have crazy sales like that.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's when I bought a lot of these things. So, yeah, this is a big deal book. Considered a canon sequel to Aliens up until, at least by the creators and the fans, up until the release of Alien 3.
And then there's a lot of people that think that this sequel to Aliens is better than the one they did in the movie. So
yeah, a lot of opinions out there. I don't go that far, by which I mean I don't compare at all. You know what I mean? I don't think I have a preference. I'm okay with multiple stories and multiple continuities exist. I don't need to fit everything into a specific box.
Yeah, especially thanks to like the movie culture we're in now. Pretty much everyone understands the concept of a multiverse. And so that is the
Yeah.
easiest way to look at it. There's kind of not so much a branching timeline, but the sequel to Aliens could be Outbreak or it could be Alien 3. Both of them both did and didn't happen depending on your preference.
Right.
Whatever, it's fine. Who cares?
Or it could also be the other Alien 3.
Yeah. Or the third version of Alien 3, because there's like 5 of them.
I know, right?
But yeah, kind of like going back to our discussion on Out of the Shadows,
Yeah.
We discussed how that book had kind of a dubious canonicity, but like at the end, who gives a shit? It's all fine. Whatever.
Yeah.
So what? Who cares? It doesn't matter.
Who gives a shit? Exactly. I think what's great about a series that sprawls over so many years and so many different creators and voices adding to it is you can kind of pick and choose what does and doesn't work for you, right? You can kind of build your own canon and be passionate about a franchise and be a big fan of it without having to like every single bit of it or even read or watch or play or whatever every single bit of it, right? If it works for you, it works for you.
We're both Sonic fans. We understand the concept of sometimes there are entries that aren't as good as others.
What do you talk? I don't know what you mean. What are you talking about? They're all perfect. What if I was like,
if you suddenly busted out the line, "My favorite Sonic game is Lost World," I might end this call right now.
I will say, I think that the 3DS version of Lost World is better than the Wii U version.
I have not played the 3DS version. I own the Wii U version though, so
it plays better is the main thing.
Dang.
So it's a little simpler, but I think that simplicity makes it play better.
Guess I got another game to buy on my list now. Great.
I don't know that it's worth it, honestly. I don't think either of them are particularly great. Let's be
Fair
clear.
enough.
And just one little Sonic segue here also. I thought Sonic Forces was pretty good. I had a lot of fun playing that game.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little short for my taste, but otherwise, I think it is better than people gave it credit for. Yeah,
I think so too. I think it was a fine entry, but probably near the top of my list is Sonic Colors. I think that game is,
Colors is real good,
exceptionally good, and
it's a lot of fun.
Features aliens, so technically on topic.
It sure does, man. That was smooth as hell. Great work.
They're cute little guys that do still go inside your body, but it's for a good reason.
Correct. Yeah. The comparisons keep stacking up.
Sure, if you squint hard enough. Anyway, Kenny, I just want to talk a little bit about the people that made this comic. You've heard me say his name no less than a dozen times. Mark Verheiden wrote this comic book.
Mm-hmm.
He was a relatively young writer at the time, and he was I believe in the intro to the 30th anniversary, he says he basically begged for it. And he was only handed a few directives, right? A few restrictions, right? Publishers wanted the story to be set on Earth. He wasn't allowed to use the Ripley character, again, probably because they didn't know what the future of the film franchise would be.
Yeah.
And the series had to feature Newt and Hicks as characters. So those were the edicts. That's what he was given. Tell a story about aliens on Earth featuring Newt and Hicks that doesn't include Ripley. Okay? And maybe there was, fair. I mean, we know that like James Cameron wrote Aliens without knowing if Sigourney Weaver was coming back.
Famously, yeah.
So maybe she didn't know if she was ever coming back, and I don't think they wanted to. I think it makes sense, right? Like let's not possibly mess up the future of a character one way or the other. Either she comes back and we go in a different direction, or she doesn't come back. We want to be able to separate the franchise away from her. Makes sense. Yeah. He also says that 20th Century Fox gave them very, very little notes on the whole thing. They were kind of cool with whatever he did. I believe it only was when it was subjects of like violence, like gore and violence or sex, that they were like, make sure it's done fairly tastefully. Like those were the only things that they said, right?
Cool.
For an artist on the book, they got Mark A. Nelson to do pencils and Ron Randall to do inking and Willie Schubert to do lettering. This book was done in black and white originally, and Mark Nelson's pencils are phenomenal. Apparently he did this process that I'm a little unfamiliar with called duo shading. Apparently you would take like specially treated paper and paint it with a chemical that would bring out like line tones and patterns and stuff. So it wasn't just like pencil on paper, right? Like there was a whole process to creating the artwork for this thing. And I think even in the colorized version, you can see the detail in the penciling and everything. But I do think that the black and white pages look amazing. It looks like old horror comics, you know?
Yeah.
Like stuff you'd find like old Warren books and stuff like that, or it looks tremendous, right? And I think that like drawing it in black and white in that style that does kind of evoke classic horror comics adds to the tone of the story in a strong way. But I also do really like the colorized versions. Have you had a chance to look at the pencils, the black and white penciled versions at all?
I did not, only because, I mean, I'm sure I've seen them before, but when it came time to actually sit down and read this, since I already knew that I owned a copy of it, I just made a beeline to that. But I'm sure I've seen images of them around, like online or whatever before.
Yeah, I'm going to send you a shot right now.
All right.
This is
Oh, that is the page I was literally just looking at in the book myself.
Doesn't that look good? This is the first shot of a proper xenomorph in the comic, right? Yeah. That looks pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it looks cool as hell.
It really does have like this nice old school tone to it. Yeah, I just really dig it. I just really dig the artwork overall.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And for the colorized re-release, right? Mm-hmm. The only colorist credit that I can find is Dark Horse Digital. So they did digital remasterings of these. Actually, I'm going to grab my physical omnibus here. Just want to see if they give a different credit in that. Nope. Dark Horse Digital did the coloring. So no specific colorist on this. It was just kind of attributed to the Dark Horse Digital coloring department.
Yeah.
And I think it looks good. I think that this artwork is a little bit more... I think it looks a little bit better than, say, Newt's Tale, right?
Yeah, I would agree to that.
But it also fits tonally with Newt's Tale as well. You know, it's kind of the same sort of color schemes. I can see similarities in the line art and that kind of stuff, you know.
Yep.
But I think that this is just a really good looking book from a very specific time in comics, right?
Yeah, late 80s.
Yeah.
This is a very late 80s looking art style in comic book.
Right.
For sure.
And I'm saying we're saying that as a positive. We're not saying that as like it's not the way we talk about the art in the Malibu Mortal Kombat comics, right? Like this is like a different style.
Yeah, it sure is. It definitely looks a lot different than that. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, crew, for this episode, we are talking issues 1 and 2 of this series because we just spent 20 minutes talking about the history behind it and everything and the creators. So we're going to cover the first 2 issues of Aliens Outbreak on this episode and cover some more issues next time.
Sounds good for me.
Kenny, do you have a plot synopsis of issues 1 and 2 of Outbreak?
I certainly do.
Let's hear it.
Several years after the events of Aliens, Hicks is volunteered for the most important job of all, an assault directly onto the Xenomorph homeworld. Meanwhile, Newt is languishing away in a mental institution plagued with never-ending nightmares. The two of them are on a crash course with getting pulled back in just when they thought they were out.
Hey, yo. Crash course, because he kind of crashes through the wall with her. It's good.
See what I did there?
I like that. That's fun.
Good. Yeah, glad to hear it.
That is it. So let's dive into this bad boy, said unironically, because I think that this is very fun comics. And we'll hold overall opinions for the end. How about that?
You got it.
So we do, in fact, open up with Newt, although I'm not sure we know it's her yet.
We don't find out until a couple of pages in. I even wrote in my notes. Starts with a woman. I assume it's Newt.
In your newts. That's what you call your notes on Newt. You call them your newts.
I do now.
I like it. She's in some kind of like examination table. Kind of almost looks like a CAT scanning machine or something, right?
I should specify she's not on the table. She's strapped to the table.
She's in the table, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Get on the plane. I'm getting in the plane, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this doctor's just kind of standing over her, and he's asking her about last night. Do you want to talk about last night? And in a classic Newt line, she says, "It won't make any difference," right?
That's right.
That's how you know it's her. And she describes a situation. This must be purely a dream, right? Because obviously these events didn't play out. But they are
later on find out that yes, it is all a dream that she was having. Yes,
right. But they're so similar to like real events. I think that is pretty good storytelling. Hicks has a similar dream in a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where this is her with her young friends who found a disc about camping. So she and some other girls steal one of the Wildcat cars. What do they call them?
And drive out to an old generator building, yeah.
They call them crawlers. And it looks like the atmospheric processing building. It's very similar in shape, but a little different. And she describes that they plug in a heater into one of the power outlets as to like imitate a campfire. And they just talk about what camping was like back in the good old days on Earth, I suppose. And of course, they're going to tell some scary stories.
Yeah, before long, they get roped into telling scary campfire stories to each other.
Yeah, it's all pretty fun and adorable so far, right?
And of course, because it's Newt, she, of course, gets roped into telling a story about xenomorphs.
Yeah.
Because what other scary stories does she have to tell, you know?
I love the way she describes them. She says, there are these things that live in space. They live to feed and to hate.
I mean, that is accurate. You can't fault her for that.
It's good dialogue, and it feels like Newt dialogue in an interesting way, you know?
Yeah.
And then she says, affirmative.
But then, unfortunately, something very bad happens. Both of her friends get killed by chest bursters.
Boom. Chest bursters bust out of her two child friends, and she starts screaming, "Not again, not again," where we cut to essentially present day, where we see her in a hospital gown banging on a wall and a guy coming to wake her up and tell her she's dreaming. It's the same doctor or I dropped the word, attendant that she was speaking to in the first place. This is where we zoom out and see this is in fact Newt. She is in fact strapped to a table, and she's not in a machine at all. My bad.
Yeah, we find out then it's a dream because turns out she's been committed to a mental institution. So, of course, she isn't going out camping.
Presumably since they got back to Earth, right?
Yeah.
Like she's been there.
I mean, she is several years older now. Yes. So that was the assumption I had, but they never really like explicitly say that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how old she is in here, but she's adult sized, right?
I remembered reading in an article, I think it was the Xenopedia article for this comic. Yes. I think they say at one point that she's approaching her 18th birthday, but I don't know if they ever actually say that in the comic anywhere.
Right. So we're picking up, how old was she in Aliens? 9 or 10?
I assumed this was roughly 10 years later, give or take.
Because Ripley says her age in that movie. Doesn't she say like this 8-year-old girl lasted longer than that with no training or something like that?
I think she does, but I don't remember specifically what the line is.
So late teens at least.
Yeah, something like that. But we go from that dream directly into another one where we see Hicks carrying Newt around with Hudson, and I don't think Vasquez is there, but Vasquez we go through the with the colonial marines during the events of Aliens. Well, sort of during the events of Aliens. There are some details that are different.
It's pretty significantly different. For starters, like Frost is there. I think Dietrich is there. Everybody's there.
I don't want to say the differences aren't important, but the reason why I was like, it's kind of different because this is a dream, not a flashback. So I just kind of assumed that was the reason why these why what we're seeing is different than what actually happened, because it's not actually a flashback.
Yes.
But most importantly, this is a dream of Hicks, not of Newt. So now we have changed perspective and are reintroducing Hicks to the story.
Yeah, we're going to change perspective a lot in this comic book series.
For sure.
This is definitely a dream. I think it's similar to Newt's dream, right? Where her dream was very, very similar to events that happened where her family in the crawler went out and someone came back with a face hugger. So she's like, it's like combining like parts of their life into like traumatic parts, like into dreams. And Hicks is having the same thing because he's got Newt, but he's got a whole team going through this reactor, going into this generator room, where inside the generator room he finds Vasquez, Drake, and Frost all dead and exploded from the inside like a chest burster would do.
Yep.
Cut from there, he goes back out into the hallway. He's trying to get Dietrich and Hudson to give him their position, and he finds Newt then cocooned up in the walls next to another body, and he wakes up. So he's having the same kind of dream.
Yeah, he's having a similar dream, and he wakes up in a place that we later on find is essentially the drunk tank of the Colonial Marines.
Yeah, it's like, I believe in the Wilkes version of this, it's literally prison. This is
I believe the door that he's behind is labeled the Brig or something like that. But he's basically sleeping off a drunken disorderly in the drunk tank.
Right. This robot comes with a screen in its face. Kind of looks like Johnny Five, right?
The reference I was going to make was Arnim Zola from Marvel Comics, but yeah, pretty much.
General Thunderbolt Ross.
But yeah, it's a big robot with like a TV screen in like the torso chest area that has like a human face talking on the screen.
It's got guns and multiple arms and all kinds of shit going on. Tank treads, it's a robot, right?
And this robot comes and bangs on the Brig door, waking up Hicks to tell him that there is a Colonel Stevens that has busted him out of the Brig because they need his help with something.
Right. Hicks is like, give it a rest, Perkins. Perkins is the guy speaking through the TV screen on the robot. He's like, I've got 24 hours to serve still on the D&D charges, which is what, drunk and disorderly, I believe.
Yep. That is correct, yes.
And he's got a cellmate, and the cellmate's like, no, get Hicks the fuck out of here. I don't want to be near this guy. He's a freak. He's all fucked up.
Yeah, I believe he says he's like infected with something, or there's something in him that wants to get out or something like that. Talking in a way that kind of makes you think he might like have a chest burster or something.
Right. Important to note that we are only seeing one side of Hicks's face so far.
That ends up being significant for later, yes.
Yeah. From here, we cut to space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we learn some interesting things about this world. We learn that it is cheaper to just abandon spacecraft than it is to like haul them in, dismantle them. It's a fun detail. First of all, it makes something like discovering the USS Sulaco drifting in space and taking it over seem plausible, right? Mm-hmm.
We're retroactively justified in having that happen, yes.
Sure. It also explains all of the salvage stuff we see popping up. Deep space salvage, there's always a salvage team. Everyone's always doing salvage, right? And while it felt like a trope, I was like, deep space salvage, sure, they're going to salvage. I like that we have something in print here that is saying, salvage teams exist because companies don't want to do the work. They don't want to spend the money to do the work, so they just leave that shit out there, and that gave rise to salvage teams and people like stealing shit off of derelicts and all of that kind of stuff.
Because like basically the gist of it is that, like you said, since it's cheaper for them to just abandon the ship than to actually, haul it down to the surface of a planet and break it down, what they would generally do is just put the ship into an orbit, generally a decaying orbit, and just let it drift until the orbit brings it into the atmosphere of the planet where it breaks apart or burns up in the atmosphere or whatever.
Collides with other space junk and starts getting broken apart.
Yeah. However, after one or two different times where the ship didn't fully break apart before finally entering the atmosphere, and then it crashed down into a populace and killed people, they decided that leaving it just decay forever wasn't the best way to do it. So they started hiring like ships that would shoot out or send out little probes that would go in like inside the derelict ship and attach a little bomb, like a nuclear bomb, and then blow it up once the decayed orbit started getting too close to the planet. That's how they like handled that situation.
Don't they say that one of those accidents was something landing in a farming colony?
They do, yes.
Yeah, and a coffee plantation on the island of Hawaii. The radiation killed the indigenous population and made it damn near impossible to find a good cup of Kona. Fascinating.
And this is all relevant to the narrative because when we cut to space, as Neal said earlier, they're in the middle of doing one of these. There is a ship. What's the derelict ship's name?
The derelict is called the Junket.
The Junket. And there is a probe, a manned probe with 2 people on it that are on their way out to dig into the ship and implant this little bomb.
And who's in charge of this operation? What branch of the U.S. military is in charge?
As a matter of fact, this has somehow become the Coast Guard's job.
Yeah, the Coast Guard. You heard that right, folks.
The Coast Guard is operating in space. The comic itself describes it as it finally gave them something to do in between rounds of playing cards with each other.
Sure. I mean, we've seen every version of Alien every universe we've checked in with. Earth is pretty much a fucking wasteland, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, so presumably maybe there ain't so much ocean for the Coast Guard to patrol anymore. But in general, I do love the idea of this being Coast Guard's jurisdiction. I mean, I know that now, for some reason, in the real world, there's a Space Force.
There sure is.
But it does seem like this would be Coast Guard responsibility. Like, I don't know. It makes too much fucking sense. They're like, well,
I mean, see, that's the thing. I read that and just instinctively my brain went, yeah, of course it's the Coast Guard's job. Duh.
Yeah, that's kind of what they do in the ocean, and everyone talks about space as a vast ocean of mystery, right? Like, yeah. All right, they're trained for that.
I mean, totally makes sense.
Yeah, teach them how to fly. You know, they already know how to fly. Teach them how to fly in space, I guess.
But yeah, anyway, this probe gets launched out, and like I said, it's a 2-man probe, and they burrow into the ship, implant the bomb. The bomb goes off just fine, but unfortunately, when it leaves the ship, it comes back with a xenomorph on it.
It does.
And like physically on it, like the xenomorph is clinging to the outside of the probe when it turns away from the junket and flies back the way it came.
There's a lot of really cool shots of the surveillance footage when they're inside the junket, right? Like you see a body that's been like dead and horribly fucked up, right?
Yeah, it looks like it's almost been torn to shreds, but it's somehow still in one piece. Yeah.
You see writing on in blood on the wall. It says "kill us all" and bloodstains everywhere. And the 2 Coast Guard officers are kind of like, one of them's like, I've seen this before. It's like mega claustrophobia or something. One guy snaps and takes the rest with him. So they just chalk it up to like some guy on board went crazy and murdered everybody else on board, right? And of course, us as Alien fans, we're a little suspect of that. But yeah, it's just it's a cool shot, and it starts teasing like the horror. It teases what you know is coming because this is an Aliens comic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But boom, they blow the ship up. They are having a hard time steering the probe back to their Coast Guard ship, the Dutton.
Yep, that's the name of the probe. Yep. And then, they have a hard time steering because turns out the xenomorph weight on there is throwing it off. Yeah. And then they freak the fuck out when they see the xenomorph, who then blows out one of the windows and kills both of them, causing the probe to blow up. And it also kills the xenomorph, as we find out later.
Hell of an introduction for the xenomorph, of course.
For sure, dude.
And it is so obvious to these Coast Guard guys, like that they haven't seen this before, right? They're like shocked that it's surviving in space in the vacuum and all that kind of stuff. It's all brand new.
One of them posits that it's some sort of parasite or something, and the other one's like, what? And then it kills them.
He says that's no parasite. It kind of is though, buddy. Like
it kind of is, yeah.
It's a part of its life cycle for sure. So we find out that all of this footage was being shown to Corporal Hicks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I knew it was only a matter of time until this happened. And he's like, the Marines knew also. That's why they never kicked me out, because they knew that they would need me for something like this someday, you know?
Yeah. I mean, he was the only survivor that was in the military of the events. So, yes.
Yeah. So from there, we cut to a television station, a real shitty looking one. Might just be a warehouse with a camera.
It probably is just a warehouse, honestly.
Yeah. And we learn a whole lot about television in this world.
Yeah, there's not quite a voiceover, but we get like text box explaining it. They're like excerpts from a book that basically the gist of it is we find out about the collapse of advertiser supported television in this world.
Right.
And it also introduces something called the eye box.
Yes.
Which is basically a laser that points into your eye that it detects like these minute specific things that happens in your eye. And when it detects those things, it automatically changes the channel for you. I'm struggling to think of what the practical use of that device would be.
It's really, really grim. It seems more like what they were describing to me was that they weren't able to make enough programming to satisfy everyone. Like everyone was turning to television just in numbers that like stations couldn't keep up with the programming, which gave rise to a lot of like cheap things to make, like religious programming and stuff like that. And as the options for what to watch rose, advertisers also had to start running shorter and shorter commercials so that people wouldn't flip away during a commercial break because there were so many other options, right?
Yeah, okay, that's fair. That makes sense, yes.
And it seems like that, like almost like an overabundance of advertising and an overabundance of choice selection just made people start flipping channels more and more, which created this eye switch thing, which is a peripheral that people could get so that if the eye switch sensed that they were losing interest in whatever they were watching, it would turn the channel immediately
automatically. I got you.
To keep them viewing, which led to advertisers now trying to find advertisements that could get around the eye switch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all very fucking grim. It kind of feels like podcasting.
A little bit, yeah.
Yes, there's just too much. And I don't know, I'm just going to gripe about this a little bit here, Kenny.
Mm-hmm.
We were almost hosted on a podcast host that's owned by iHeartRadio.
All right.
And the thing that really turned me off on that was the cost of the hosting and also how insistent they were that we put a bunch of ad breaks in so that they could make money off of our show. Yeah, they would give us a tiny cut, but they were like, you need to put like 10 to 12 ad breaks in your episodes.
Yeah, I remember back at the very beginning, I think we did experiment with, trying out putting 1 or 2 ad breaks in the show.
Yes.
And then after we did like 1 or 2 episodes, we were like, nah.
Not doing it. No way. But have you listened to any podcasts that are hosted by iHeart, like the Boy Meets World one, for instance? Or Fake Doctors, Real Friends? Are you a big Scrubs guy?
I'm not, no.
There is an insane amount of advertising on them. It cuts in constantly, and it's all dynamic ads, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just the fucking worst. And like that's that. So reading this thing about TV, about them, like more advertising, faster advertising, all of this stuff, trying to get around people's advertising, causing them to create different kinds of advertise. It's just like I guess Mark Verheiden was right, but it was podcasts, not TV, that he needed to write this about.
And I should say for the crew out there, for the listeners, the whole reason why this is relevant to the narrative of this comic is because how Neal mentioned a little bit ago that they started, there were so many viewers that they needed so many more channels that they just started churning out the like least expensive stuff that they could make.
Yes.
And so the primary thing that was shown on TV was public access channels, most of which were like religion based.
Yes, religious content.
And that ties into the reason why this is relevant, because we're in this presumably film studio that's actually most likely just a warehouse, and it's some guy bringing in an antique video camera to set it up and record this like religious preacher guy that's about to give this sermon on video. And turns out the thing that he's about to give this sermon on is he has what I thought was originally in stasis, but then later on found out, or rather was told in the Xenopedia article, it's probably just a projection.
It's a projection.
Of
it's
a
a projection
of a xenomorph. Like he's about to
Yes.
give a sermon about this xenomorph and talk about how it's actually like the second coming of the Messiah or whatever.
He calls it
And the dude's just like, yeah, sure, okay, whatever, and sets up the camera.
right. He calls it the true Messiah, and the guy helping him set up the camera was like, "Yeah, all right. I hooked a guy up last week who said the Messiah was playing third base for the Osaka Pistons, so it doesn't matter
Great
to me."
line.
So there's just a whole lot of this religious programming, right? Kind of put out there to exploit the audience.
They say in the text excerpts from this book that religious content outweighs secular content by roughly 100 to 1 on the airwaves now. So
Right.
this is like the primary thing
Yes.
you see on TV.
Which is not that's maybe the way that this whole thing doesn't apply to podcasting, because we know people who go to church don't know how to listen to a podcast.
That is correct, yes.
Also, side note, this preacher guy, super trustworthy face, got a good feeling about him.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
for sure.
He kind of looks like, what was the guy's name? Xanatos from Gargoyles.
Yep, David Xanatos, I'm pretty sure that was his name, yes.
Yeah, he kind of looks like him.
He's extremely not suspicious and very trustworthy looking. I'll put it that way.
Totally. So from here, we cut to Newt in the institution, and her friend, I don't remember her friend's name, is talking to her, and she's like, check out Dee Dee. We find out that this is about the eye switch, right? So
Yeah.
Dee Dee's over there.
Like this is why the eye switch was introduced, because one of the other people in the institution with Newt is like hooked up to one and using it throughout this entire scene.
Yeah, it's fucking creepy because it literally is it's like a camera strapped to your chair pointed at you, but instead of a lens, it's shooting a laser beam into your eye.
It just has a laser beam direct. Like there's even like a crosshair over your eye where the beam is shooting into it and everything.
Yeah, and Dee Dee over here is averaging 50 switches. I don't know in the time frame, but that's a lot of channel switches, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And presumably this is what she does. She just sits there and flips channels. Newt is not doing well. The reason that her friend got interrupted is because Newt spilled her food. She can't even walk straight.
She is too heavily medicated.
Turns out that's how she's being treated. Dr. Hill is just giving her sedative after sedative after sedative. That's the course of treatment for poor Newt.
Yeah, pretty much.
It sucks. It's really, really bad. Meanwhile, we continue to see these channels flip.
Yeah, during this conversation, the channels just keep flipping and flipping and flipping on Dee Dee's eye switch. And then at the very end of the scene, she ends up flipping to the channel that Xanatos guy is giving his Xenomorph sermon about.
Yes, as Newt is having a freak out about the fact that she says, I didn't ask to be born out there. Nobody warned me about the risks, talking about Acheron, talking about being born where the xenomorphs were, throwing her tray at her friend. Bam, this guy comes on the TV talking about the Church of Immaculate Incubation.
What a name.
Jesus Christ. Newt is dragged out screaming about how you can't get it out of me with drugs. I saw them tear apart my mother like a doll, and they're still out there. Really fucking grim, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Meanwhile, someone else is checking out this broadcast on the ultimate communion with the true something or other. They freeze frame it there. We are back at the military base.
And we're back at Hicks, and he finally goes to see that Corporal Stevens that was mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And during their conversation, we find out that Hicks has a really nasty facial scar on the side of his face from when part of it got melted off by xenomorph blood.
In the movie, we saw that happen.
Yeah.
When he and Ripley are getting in the elevator.
And turns out, the entire half of his face is just a melted mess. And every time anyone looks at him, they freak the hell out about it.
Yes, they think that he's been infected by the alien's blood.
Yeah, they think he's what's the word? Contagious or
Right.
contaminated in some way, and if they're around him, it'll spread to them.
Sure.
And so we find out that, like, ever since he got back, he was in quarantine for months healing, and he
Yeah.
never got a single visitor. When he got back out and got put into active duty, like, no one would team up or work with him, and like he would have to like go to mess and like eat his meals alone and
Yeah.
all that. And yeah,
Now, spoiler alert for future storylines. I think in the third one, we do finally get the introduction of Ellen Ripley.
in the third like arc of this trilogy of comics, you mean?
In the third arc of the trilogy of comics.
Okay.
It doesn't happen in this series, and I don't think it happens in the second one. I think it happens in the third one.
Is that Nightmare Asylum or is that Female War?
I think it's Female War because I think she's one
Okay.
of the titular females.
Okay, so Nightmare Asylum is part 2, and then Female War is part 3. Got it.
Yeah, and I know that those are the novel titles. I'm not sure if they are also the comic book titles because like this was changed to Earth Hive and something was changed to Earth War. Like I'm not sure, but essentially,
Yeah, but whatever. It's part 3 of this 3-part arc. I gotcha.
So my question is, where's Ripley in all of this now, right? Like, obviously she must have ran into some shit also. I'm sure we'll learn about it, but I'm thinking like she absolutely would have been visiting Hicks. She would have been visiting Newt, she would have been there for him. So her absence is telling. That means that some shit's going on with her. She's not one who would abandon these people,
And she actually does briefly get a mention at one point. It's actually in the next issue that it happens.
Right.
But like a group of people are talking about Ripley and Hicks and Newt, and one of them says, "And Ripley, well, ... you know what happened to her."
Right.
And then it never follows up on what that actually means in this comic.
Yes.
So we know she's off doing something, but as of right now, we don't know what. But whatever it is, it's preventing her from coming to see Hicks or Newt while they're convalescing.
As a side note, Kenny, in the Wilkes and Billy versions, I don't believe it's actually Ripley. I believe it is a synthetic modeled after Ripley. So that was their workaround
okay.
for that to keep her.
All right, that's fair, I guess.
Because
Sure.
because of Alien 3.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, that's I mean, what else like if you're insisting on making this canon, what other option really is there?
I mean, you can't
I guess.
clone Ripley. That would be insane.
Yeah, that would be stupid. Who would ever think of doing
just
that?
be fucking idiotic. Anyway.
But anyway,
where were we here? Oh, so Hicks is kind of recounting to these people because they start asking about his record, right? All of this misbehavior and stuff like that. And he sort of recounts to them what happened on Acheron and what happened since then, right?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, because everyone kept on leaving him alone and was like scared of him and would be like, was afraid to go around him or interact with him at all, his mental health really started taking a decline, and he would like go out of his way to like get drunk on the job and pick fights with people. The implication being that D&D we saw him with earlier, this is not the first time that's happened to him,
It's a pattern, and it's a bummer to see. Like, it's a bummer to see beloved characters in these terrible situations. Like, it's awful to see Newt just stuck in this institution where she's just being drugged and not getting good treatment, and it sucks to see Hicks come back as like a pariah and just like turn to the bottle
drunk.
and all of this kind of stuff. It's a real fucking bummer. It's also very 1988, right? Like,
extremely. Yes.
It feels it like it sucks, but it also feels like a direction that this story would have gone in, like post Aliens.
I mean, it's one of those things where, like you said, it's very 80s. It feels like kind of the standard thing to do in a situation like this. Like, on the other hand, that does feel like that's what would happen, you know?
Yeah, this is a post Watchmen comic, right?
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
It's definitely got that.
Yeah, it definitely does. That's a good way to
comic fans out there will understand what I mean by this. We're in the post Watchmen era.
Yeah.
So they're showing him the footage. He says that the Coast Guard were able to get all of the data off of that Coast Guard probe before it blew up. They had the entire onboard specifically the information from the junket, right? So they have like all of the the crew, the trajectories, the flight path, all of the stuff of the junket. And they are planning an operation to, I guess, go check out the source of the xenomorphs.
Yeah, like I didn't understand it at the time. Like I didn't pick up like the implication that they were saying here, but what we're supposed to infer from this conversation is that the US what we're supposed to infer from this is that the U.S. colonial Marines, well, I
Yes.
guess not the U.S. colonial Marines, the colonial Marines have figured out what they believe to be the Xenomorph homeworld.
Yep.
And since Hicks is, I guess, the only Marine that survived an encounter with them, he's been volunteered by them to lead an assault team there to, I think they said they want to bring samples back, I believe is what they say.
They do. The other guy in the meeting is a geneticist, right? Geneticist, pardon me. And he says to Hicks, you seek redemption, I seek specimens.
But yeah, the key part here is that the place they're going is believed to be like the home world of the xenomorphs. That's like the important thing here. And the reason I'm stressing that is because, like I said, when I was reading that earlier, I didn't pick that up. And so I was just like, oh, okay, they're just going to some random place, whatever, who cares?
Right.
I didn't understand that at first. So
yeah, but I like the idea that they're like, we're going to take the war to them. And it's, and don't quote me on this. I'm pretty sure it's not LV-426. Like, I'm pretty sure we are, because, I mean, again, derelict ship, right? Up to this point, that's been a derelict ship.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing this alien homeworld concept. And I am 100%, like, I don't remember it, but I'm 100% ready to buy it as my personal canon. And pathogen shit can fuck right off.
Well, we still got a little ways to go before we get there, though.
Even though I'm coming around on the pathogen stuff.
Yeah, you certainly are. That's for sure.
There's been a lot more pathogen-based content in recent times that has made more sense to me than what we were stuck with for like 9 years. Anyway.
But yeah, we cut from there to Newt getting woken up and informed that there is someone here to see her. Yeah. And in short order, we find out that that person is, in fact, Hicks.
She was having a gnarly nightmare before that. And I really kind of like it, the way she's dreaming about, obviously, a xenomorph, but it's all kinds of twisted up because it's in her dream. It's got like red glowing eyes and like teeth jutting out from its face and stuff like that. It's very cool.
It's a xenomorph that looks kind of like Violator from Spawn.
It does have some Violator in it, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
I can totally see that. I like it. But yeah, so she gets waken up. She gets taken to room 4 for visiting, where she is informed that she's not allowed to speak about her treatment or her visitation will be shut off, which is absolutely fucked.
And it's also relevant to what's about to happen in ways that you can probably imagine.
Any discussion of hospital therapy or treatments will result in termination of visitation and suspension of privileges. Like, that's just something you only do when you know you're doing some shitty stuff, right? Like, I just can't get over how fucked up this place is.
But yeah, Hicks goes to see Newt and tells her that he's, setting up a trip to go to the Xenomorph homeworld, and he never really makes it clear right now why he's even telling her this.
Right. But
he says, I'm going on this trip. I might be gone for a while. And she's immediately like, I want to go with you. And he's like, I don't think you really can. And she's like, no, I need to go with you.
Get me the fuck out of here. All they do is drug me. Right.
And that's exactly the problem. She's like, I need to go with you because they're really messing with me here. They just keep me on sedatives 24/7. Right. And then the visit immediately gets shut down because she starts talking about what they're doing to her.
Yeah. And he's like, what do you mean? What are they doing to you? And she points out something interesting here. I got a few things to say about this scene, as I'm sure you expected. They keep doping her up with sedatives, which make her sleep, which make her have nightmares, which make her more terrified and more agitated. So then they give her more drugs that just make her sleep more, which make her
Yeah,
have more
as
nightmares.
an excuse to drug her more. Yeah.
Like it's just a cycle that's perpetuating itself. It's the wrong treatment to begin with, but they're only making it worse. And I like that she tells Hicks, and Hicks is like, what are they doing to you? Right? Like he's concerned about this. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And the setup of you're not allowed to talk about your treatment with your visitors. I get the sense from this that the reason that Hicks is there now to visit her is to tell her he's going to hunt down the aliens on their home world, probably in an attempt to help her get some closure, right? He's like, we're going to try to get this shit taken care of.
Well, while that is true, later on, we see Hicks ruminating to himself about why he went there, and the best answer he could come up with is, maybe I wanted there to be someone that was actually going to miss me while I was gone. I'm not even sure.
I'm sure that's also a part of it, which kind of goes into this other theory I have, is that he visits her often, maybe not daily, but like he certainly shows up to check on her. This isn't the first time he's shown up to visit her. He knew where to go, Yeah,
because she also wasn't surprised that it was him.
Right.
Of course, the implication is also that he is the only person that's been ever coming to visit her.
Well, we all know what happened to Ripley.
That's true.
And she has
You got me there.
She doesn't really have any other family on Earth. Although I think maybe she does in the Gibson Alien 3. I think that she gets sent to live with relatives on Earth.
I gotcha. Yeah, because I believe Hicks and Bishop are the main characters of that one, if I recall.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
But I like this idea that he visits her and checks in on her and he cares about her. And it would make sense that he didn't know what was going on to her in this place, because ordinarily she's not allowed to speak of her treatment, but she's just gotten so desperate at this point that she's like, she's like, if you're going to go away and you may not be back, like, this is my last chance to tell you that you need to get me out of here.
Yeah,
right?
Things are fucked, dog. Help me out.
It's good. Like, it's good. I don't know, man. I'm getting the feels because I'm remembering how much I love these characters, and like they're like, seeing them together and seeing them there for each other is working for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So let's continue.
Unfortunately, because she did admit what kind of treatment she's getting, they immediately end the meeting and haul her away, and Hicks gets extremely angry and very upset and starts threatening people.
Yes.
And then I was like, oh, cool, let's see what happened next. And then I turned the page and discovered that was how issue 1 ends.
Issue 1 ends with Hicks like slamming his hands on the glass and yelling out for Newt. Hardcore.
I did not know that was the ending at the time, but after I realized that was the ending, I was like, wow, what a strange place to finish this issue.
Sure. I should say one note for the 30th anniversary hardcover, if anyone's checking it out that way. No breaks. It just goes. And at this point, it jumps into the theory of alien propagation, and then it cuts back into issue 2, and there's no real chapter breaks or anything. It's just one long story.
In the omnibus, there is chapter breaks. We have like a little page where they have the name of the issue, what year it came out, and then like a panel with the cover of that issue on it. So we do get chapter breaks in the physical omnibus I have.
It's much easier for me to read these, the individual issues like I got them.
And also, I should say that the theory of alien propagation is printed in the books not just before this arc, but the alien propagation issue is literally the first issue in the omnibus. Okay. That is how the book starts.
And that is something that we're going to talk about. Maybe with these, but possibly as its own thing afterwards. I'm not entirely sure yet.
We haven't really decided yet.
Yeah, it's a interesting read. You see some in an early version. You see what Mark Verheiden imagined the space jockey to be. It's pretty cool. It's a nice look at classic alien canon. But we'll talk about that probably at the end of this. I think we should just jump right into it. tack it on with our last episode on these comics or something.
Then in that case, I suppose we may as well get onto it with issue 2, which
Yes.
starts off with what we eventually discover is Newt fucking blitzed out on pills, partially passed out, partially asleep, partially having nightmares. We're not really sure, but she's completely zonked out on some kind of sedative,
Yeah.
and she is having a wild ass hallucination.
Yeah, of like being a fetus, growing in a egg-like thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's all very weird.
She is imagining herself as a fetus before, and then smash cut to after being born, and then being like a little baby in a crib,
Yeah,
and
looking
then
up at
it
her
just
mother.
goes on from there.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts. Next, we cut to
Hicks. Hicks, who is also zonked out, but this time it's on alcohol rather than pills.
Yeah, he's remembering his childhood. He's running around with a little toy spaceship, remembering his time enlisting in the Marine Corps, I suppose.
He sees like a join the Marines poster, and he's like, psh, whatever, jerk.
He's remembering that time he fucked that lady.
That's right.
That's in there too.
It certainly is. And but this section of the scene ends with him deciding that he is going to go on this trip to the Xenomorph homeworld without Newt.
One of these scenes, in the dream scene, it's the junket. We see the cargo express, the junket cargo express, and we see the pilot's name is Likowski.
Which actually does end up becoming important later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, Hicks decides he's going to go on this trip without her, which implies that he was planning on bringing her before this point.
Right.
But then we cut to a scene where Colonel Stevens is with some other military guy, and they're having a discussion that almost turns into an argument because Stevens doesn't want to bring Hicks with him because he doesn't trust him and doesn't think he's sane enough to be able to go on the mission.
Yeah, and this is where we get the conversation. The guy says, Stevens says, it's not like the Acheron mission was a success. The only survivors were a kid, a civilian named Ripley, and Hicks. The kid's a brain case, and Ripley, well, you know what became of her. And so the other guy's like, yeah, Hicks is the only experienced hand available.
Yeah.
We moved him in with the grunts.
Yeah. That's ultimately why they're going with him, whether they think it's a good idea or not, as it turns out. So
he's our only guy. Then we cut to loading up the ship for the expedition, right? And is it the same guy? I don't know this guy's name. They name him later, so we'll get to it. But this guy's...
I think it is the same guy, though, I think.
Okay. This guy's screaming. He's like, what the fuck? Why are you loading those on? And the guy's like, it's their plasma rifles. Corporal Hicks wanted us to bring plasma rifles on this mission. And he's like, tell him to be in my office now. Right?
Yep.
This guy doesn't want plasma rifles. He says blasters are notoriously unstable and grossly destructive, and we're collecting specimens, not pieces.
And Hicks is like, look, motherfucker, you asked me to set up the ship, and I'm the only person here that actually knows what we're in for. So if you want this done, you're just going to have to trust me. And then Stevens is like, well, too bad, motherfucker. I don't trust you. Get those things off the ship. That is a direct order. And Hicks is like, fuck, we're screwed.
Yeah, and anyone who has played Fireteam Elite knows that the plasma weapons are very, very good weapons to use against xenomorphs. This must be like the earliest mention of plasma weapons, right? I know that they exist in all parts of the canon now.
Yeah.
But I love that this is potentially where that idea came from. Might have been mentioned. Maybe it was in like one of the novels, right? Like in the Alien novel, they're like, wish we had some plasma rifles.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Right, Brett? You know?
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, from there we cut to some dudes playing pickleball.
And it's extremely funny because these two dudes, as far as I know, are never actually given names, and their Xenopedia articles literally just refer to them as red and green, which is really funny because in the colorized version of this comic, they are not in those respective colors. One of them has like a vaguely brown tan suit and the other one is wearing blue, but their names are still apparently red and green.
In the version I'm looking at, oh yeah, I see them in the suits, yeah. But they're just, yeah, so they're playing racquetball. I said pickleball to be funny because I feel like I've heard about pickleball once a day for the past 17 weeks.
Yeah, pretty much. But it turns out they're not actually playing it. They're playing some video hologram board game that they're like controlling miniaturized versions of themselves in it.
It's a very, very funny scene because we check in as if it's a real game, and then we just zoom out and they're like, they're playing a fucking video game, and the guy's like, man, that was a good match. I almost worked up a sweat. They're just like dudes playing Switch.
The comic implies that these guys work for Weyland-Yutani, but later on we find out that they in fact do not. They work for a company that is not named right now, but later on we find out is called LaSalle Bionational.
Okay, so it's not. So we have LaSalle Bionational. We know about Hyperdyne. We know about the Juto Combine. You know, Yutani and Weyland-Yutani, etc. Got a whole lot of corporations, a whole lot of megacorps in this universe.
There's the future is very heavily corporatized. Apparently, that is correct,
and so is the present.
Yeah, that is correct. But yeah, Red and Green here are talking about how some big government contract and how they want to like basically cut out that government thing like at the legs and like get the drop on whatever it is they're trying to do. They mentioned something about getting specimens, which we already know about.
Bioweapons are the future.
And then they start having this conversation about this guy named Patrick Massey, who is a lawyer and has a doctorate in law, who rather than going to work in some kind of big corporate law firm, joined the Colonial Marines and then later on got court-martialed.
Yeah. He joined the Marines not because he needed to serve, but because he wanted to kill things, and got court-martialed because he tried to kill his SO, because his SO refused to like attack a colony of unarmed civilians or something like that, right?
It is his CO because it's commanding officer. Yes, his CO refused to give an order telling them to go into a village full of civilians and kill people for effectively no reason. And this Patrick Massey was so mad that he wouldn't give this order that he attacked and tried to kill his officer for not giving that order, to which, of course, he got court-martialed. But then these two guys, or rather, presumably the company that they work for, paid off the court-martialing tribunal and then hired him to kind of just become like a cleaner that works freelance for them regularly.
Yeah, he's a real Patrick Bateman type. What's
he certainly is.
They're saying all this stuff as we're seeing him like this presumably handsome guy. He has a wife and a child. He's blonde and well built, right?
He has got his cool pair of sunglasses on. We see him like talking to his family, getting ready for work, etc., etc.
And just being like behind the scenes, this horrible, awful sociopath.
Yeah, they explicitly do describe him as a sociopath later on in the comic, yes.
It's grim, and what happens with him later in this issue is incredibly grim, but we'll get there.
We certainly will.
So from here we cut to, I had a hard time following this, I'm not going to lie. Is this more Newt Nightmares?
Yeah, this is one page of a Newt Nightmare that I'm looking at right now. She's back as being a little kid looking at the mobile again, and then some weird little pterodactyl creature flies by over, and then a xenomorph comes out of nowhere and bites part of her mom's head off.
Right.
And she has this, there's this voiceover where she's talking about how, the darkness is covering her like a blanket. And then, let's see, she was torn from her mother, but her true mother is actually still a part of her. And it's implied that she's, talking about the xenomorph because that is listed, over where a big face of the xenomorph queen is, leaning towards into the panel.
So it's like she's speaking to her mom, and we see this queen in the last panel, and she says her teeth glitter like the stars, God, she is impossibly beautiful. She loves me more than you ever could. So like this is just more of her just breaking down, right? Like,
And I'm not gonna lie, it's thematically interesting as far as, like you said, we just see more of her breaking down, but like narratively, I'm not really sure it means anything, you know?
yeah,
It's just, it feels like it's just kind of there for flavor.
pretty sure it's going somewhere, but we're not there yet, and I don't think we're there.
Yeah,
in this
we're
issue.
not there yet, which is why I'm like, it doesn't really feel like it needs to be there,
Right.
because the reason why it does hasn't happened yet, you know?
Yeah. So from there, we cut to the Marine boys training for the mission, right?
Yep.
And they are in some power armor. So they're in some spacesuits with helmets.
Yeah, they look like big, huge suits of powered armor, and like they have a helmet that's like pretty much just an entire glass dome from the neck up.
It looks like the expedition suit helmets quite a bit, you know?
It certainly does.
But their body armor looks like Robotech, which it rules. And they're doing some kind of like attack. It's the two guys like ducked behind behind cover with this big like rolling tank coming up behind them. And it's Easley, and I don't know the other guy's name. We do learn it though.
We do. It is Butler.
Easley and Butler, right? And so they're trying to make a plan to take this thing down.
And they do it. One of them leans out with his gun and blows out, quote, the aft plate. And they celebrate when one of them gets shot in the chest by a big gun.
Yeah. And that gun was fired by Hicks, and this was all a training exercise.
Turns out, what we see is him whipping a group of soldiers into shape on some kind of simulated battlefield. Yeah.
Yeah, and Hicks is like, sure, you took out the big tank thing and you took out the guns, but you celebrated too early because I was still there with the gun. Nothing is ever certain in battle, right? That's his big mission statement here.
Yep.
Yeah, so because you fucked up, we're all going to spend the day on the course. Maybe you guys will learn some shit.
And then this is when we find out that it seems like he's been, like, if I'm reading this VO part correctly, it sounds like he's been doing this and training them for over a year. So I guess there was like a 1 year time jump there that the comic just doesn't point out.
Yeah, it's definitely been a large amount of time, enough time for him to start getting back into this.
I'm not saying it's weird that there's a time jump. I'm saying it's weird that the comic doesn't point out that there is one.
Yeah, it's a significant time jump because they've gathered a team for this mission to the alien home planet and are doing specialized training to prepare for it.
The voiceover specifically says they'd been working as a unit since inception, period, just over a year. It showed.
Right. And Hicks has this whole monologue about how he thinks about his old team, you know, even that.
He sees how these guys are working together, and it reminds him of how good his buddies on Acheron were, and so on.
Right. And he has this thing where he talks about, like, he's like, they were team, and he's like, no, they were my friends. Like, he has this like revelation, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's good character building. The timeline is a little bit messy because why were they prepping the ship so early? Unless they're not. No, he's got to be on Earth. I don't know. It doesn't.
Yeah,
matter.
he's definitely on Earth, as we're about to see.
Right. So when they were loading the ship, we have picked up in the future also. Right.
Presumably, yeah.
So the time cut.
So I guess the time jump happened even before that.
Between issues 1 and 2, maybe.
Probably. That seems likely. Yeah.
Also explains how far Newt's mind has deteriorated in the interim if it's been that long.
Speaking of Newt, we cut to her and she is about to get a laser lobotomy, which, side note, good band name.
Yes. Yeah. The doctors are talking to her and they're like, look, you don't have any family or next of kin or, caretakers or anyone.
Since you're a minor with no next of kin, we don't even need permission, yours or anyone's.
Right.
But we figured we'd let you know what it is we're about to do with you.
Right.
And we don't get a full explanation, but we get little snitches and snatches of like, it sounds like they're going to burn part of her brain away with a laser.
Yes.
So laser lobotomy.
Yeah. And they're like, we're just being nice, telling you that we're going to totally zap your brain, right? Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that. Doesn't seem particularly nice to me, but it's a good thing that they did this because our boy Hicks happened to have hacked into the records
Yep.
of this institution and found out that this was their plan. And he's like, oh, hell no, I can't let this happen.
Yeah, he had already decided he wasn't going to take her with him, but then he sees that and he's like, oh no, she's absolutely coming with me now. So
Yeah.
you know what he does? He fucking breaks into the facility to try to get her back.
He
My boy.
busts in fucking Kyle Reese style, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because this is Michael Biehn, right?
It sure is.
Took out security, kicked the doors down, scares a nurse with his uggo face, and is like,
the quote is, see my face? Scary, ain't it? Where is she?
tell me where Rebecca is, right? Yeah, and she does, and then security tries to stop him, and he's like, are you kidding me? Nice try, quick draw, put your gun away.
Yeah, kicks their ass too, knocks a whole bunch of people out, finds her and scoops her up. And then he has the great line, damn kid, you look like shit. And then she says, look who's talking.
Yeah, it's good. So now he's hacking his way out, right? He's on some like electronics on the wall. She's like, what are you doing? And he's like, a little remodeling marine style. I guess I'm not hacking. He's putting charges on the wall. It's pretty obvious.
He
that's
sure
what he's
is,
doing.
yeah.
Meanwhile, some
He's
dudes
blowing out that wall, baby.
Dudes are shooting at him with the guns, and he's like, keep your head down. We go in 8, scoops her up, wall blows up. He jumps out onto jet rescue technology. That's what they call it.
Yeah, he has some kind of like floating platform thing stationed outside that they say was designed for high-rise fire rescues.
Right.
But he basically remods it to like float around and wait outside for them so he can blow out the wall, toss the two of them on it, and then fly away before security is the wiser.
He says the technology was developed after the World Trade Center smoked in 24. So he was 23 years off.
He sure was.
But yeah, seems like a useful thing, right? Designed
Maybe they rebuilt it and then it burned down. Who knows?
Well, I guess we'll find out in about a year.
Yeah, about a year and a half. Yeah, exactly.
It's cool technology. It's a flying platform that you can like fly up high into a building and people can jump out onto it and you can float them down, right? It's pretty smart. It's got a cockpit. It can fly pretty fast because he says, like, he gets in the cockpit and he's like, I hit Mach 2 before the last piece of plaster hit the ground. So he, like, bolted the fuck out of there with this thing.
And he heads back to the ship, which we later on we discover is called the Benedict. And I should say that when he went to go break Newt out, he did that only 12 hours before the ship was supposed to launch.
Yeah.
So this is like the last thing he does before they leave. And when he comes back, he's dressed Newt up in like colonial marine outfits and is like dragging her along, and she's like pretending to be unconscious as if she's another soldier so he can like smuggle her in with them when they leave.
Guy asks him, Corporal Hicks, is there something wrong? And he says, yeah, the Dodgers are still in Los Angeles.
And then he straps her into a pod, and she's like, we're going back, aren't we? We really are. And he just doesn't say anything before activating the pod.
Also, as of 2022, time of this recording, the Dodgers are still in Los Angeles.
And so, yeah, we see everyone strapping in, and the ship finally takes off. And then he has like a little, monologue about how pissed off Stevens is going to be when he finds out.
Right.
But then we cut back to, I believe this is Red and Green discussing something that happened with Patrick Massey.
I want to talk. They're coming out of a show. They're in like tuxedos, like coat and tails, right?
Yeah, they're literally wearing tuxedos walking out of what looks like a movie theater, but is branded the 1990s hologram show.
Yeah, and he's like, I haven't seen industrial noise like that since college. So were they like was this like a replay of like an orgy?
Yeah, maybe. Who knows?
The band Orgy, an orgy concert.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. Don't worry.
Okay.
They even mention David Byrne at the side of that panel, though, too.
Yeah. Look at that.
Yep.
That's so funny. I guess we know what kind of music Mark Verheiden was into.
Yeah, I guess. Hey, nothing wrong with that, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I have listened to the band Orgy before, and they're not terrible.
Sure.
But anyway, they get into presumably a limo or whatever, and they have like their snifters of brandy and all that.
And their cigars.
And
the one guy's always smoking a cigar.
And they start talking about a new development that happened with Patrick Massey that is initially described as a, quote, damned stupid mistake. So you know something shitty is about to happen.
Yeah. Somebody sent a communication to Massey, classified mail, through an unclassified channel, right? Sounds like some never mind. Sounds like some Hillary Clinton shit.
A coin flip as to whether that's staying in or not.
It's staying in, but I don't mean it.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, like you said, it's classified mail that somebody stupidly sent through an unclassified channel. And unfortunately, that classified mail was footage of a xenomorph. And the reason that's unfortunate is because it is his son that accessed, found, and opened this file.
Found it and then showed it to his mom.
And it's clear that neither of them know what this is.
Right. So we cut to Massey coming home and his wife saying, Pat, we just saw this horrible thing on the read screen. From there, the house is just absolutely destroyed. Right.
Yep. The TV is knocked over, the table's busted, and Massey is sitting there in a chair, head in his hands, bawling his eyes out while the police go over the place.
We see an arm hanging over a bathtub. Presumably that's his child. We see another body, presumably his wife, covered in a bloody white sheet, a knife stuck on the ground, blood stain on the wall. The guys, red and green, is that their names?
Red and green, yeah.
Yeah, discuss it. They're like, regulations are quite clear on the procedure in cases like this. He did a hell of a job making it look like a robbery gone bad, and the police don't suspect a thing.
And then they have the great line, I wonder how it feels being a sociopath. I imagine it's quite liberating.
Jesus
so
Christ.
You probably get a pretty good sense of what happened here, listeners.
Yeah. The man killed after 6 years of marriage, killed his maybe 6-year-old son, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, killed his
wife
and a single-digit age child for seeing this your eyes only message on the view screen.
Yeah, they're setting this guy up to be fucking terrifying. Right.
I believe they also, I think this final panel of the body covered in the sheet with a knife, I don't think that's one of the family members. I think that's supposed to be the guy that accidentally sent the file in an unclassified channel.
Oh, you think so? That could be. Either way, someone got murdered.
Well, my brain processed it as the other family member when I read it, but in the article, they say that's who that was. And then I was like, oh, yeah, because like if there was a knife and blood all over the place and everything, it probably wouldn't register as just a robbery, you know,
sure.
like it was with his family. So
anyway, a lot of people just died, and either way, Patrick Massey just killed his family, and they say they're like he acted admirably. These guys say about it.
Yeah, under the circumstances, no less. And what's great is they say they even put like a psych eval on him, and they're like, oh yeah, all of his results were absolutely within normal tolerable limits, which means he did not, have any problems with this psychologically or emotionally. That is why they eventually end up calling him a sociopath, which he certainly sounds like one.
Yeah, but we also don't know how strict their limits are, right?
That's true.
Like, they might be giving people a wide berth.
Interestingly, this comic actually ends with that classified transmission that his family intercepted. And this is
eyes only data.
Yeah, eyes only data lock, bionational internal memorandum, Operation Outreach. And this is where we find out that Hicks's ship is called the Benedict.
Yes.
And interestingly here, it's listed as taking off on April 5th, 54, and I don't know what year 54 is supposed to be because this comic takes place in roughly 2190 or so, give or take. So I think that was probably just a typo.
Could be. They've said some other things. I was going to ask you about the year also. This might have been before, because wasn't there a time when they moved up what year Aliens took, or moved out what year Alien took place, and that adjusted the timeline accordingly?
Maybe. I mean, there might have been. I mean, I know that as of right now, in the current canon, Alien takes place in 2122 and Aliens takes place in 2179,
Right.
but it might not have always been that way. That's a good point.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe it's a different. Maybe they're on the Mayan calendar. I don't know.
But yeah, this data that we're seeing here reveals that after the Benedict launches, LaSalle Bionational launched their own ship, the K-014, that was specifically intended to pursue the Benedict wherever it goes.
Yeah.
And Pat Massey is, of course, the captain of that ship.
Yeah.
And it says here, the K-014's mission is twofold. First, follow the Benedict to the alien homeworld and gather data on the life form. And second, inhibit the Benedict's crew from retrieving a viable test subject. Captain Massey has been given carte blanche towards that particular end. So
Good
that's
idea.
fun.
Yes. The message continues on that in the interim, Bionational's research team is examining the human specimen salvaged from the ejected pilot's pod of the junket.
And that's when we find out that one of the guys actually survived on that probe, as it turns out. Well, if you can call it surviving, anyway.
James Lakowski, who I mentioned earlier, survived. His pod has been damaged, causing loss of atmosphere, but vital signs somehow preserved by the infusion of the alien life form. This is where we learn that there is a face hugger attached to the man.
There sure is. And this face hugger has a whole bunch of spikes coming out of its back. So that's fun.
Yeah. That's implying maybe it's this is our first royal face hugger.
Maybe.
Because that is definitely a queen in the panel above him, right?
Yep, it sure is. Yeah, that is correct.
And he is, in fact, on Earth.
He is, yes.
Full-scale testing will commence within the next 48 hours.
I believe they say, after retrieval, both specimens were brought to Bionational's Houston lab for analysis. So he is currently in a hospital in Houston with a facehugger attached to him.
Oh, boy.
And listeners, that is how issue 2 ends.
It ends on a dialogue, again, similar to what we saw in the Newt dream, might still be a part of hers, where it says, "Protect me, mother. Don't let them hurt me, please." Again, I think implying that this is a queen on his face, and also implying something that I can't be making this up. I believe that there is some kind of like, first of all, I hope I'm wrong about this, or I don't know that I am, but there's some kind of like connection that Newt has with the Xenomorphs, like a psychic connection almost.
You know, as I've mentioned before, I've never read this comic before, so I have only read the first 2 issues of this arc. But that is familiar to me because this is not the first time you've said that.
Right.
So I'm inclined to assume that, yes, that's how it plays out.
I brought it up in context in comparison to the Alien Covenant Origins novel, right? And the visions that Duncan Fields were having, right?
That is his name, yes.
Yeah, and I brought up a few things about how much that book reminded me of this series with all of the corporate stuff, and then like this weird sort of cult-like stuff that's going to start popping up, and then him having these visions and the psychic stuff, like
kind of like how in Sea of Sorrows, the main character of that book has that psychic connection to xenomorphs.
But yeah, I mean, the psychics are a thing that pop up in the world of Alien.
It's happened a few times, and it seems to always happen to someone that has some major life event connected to them. It's not like somebody's just like born that way, you know.
Yeah, and I can't say, because I read this in 2018. I've read it twice, I believe. I read the Billy and Wilkes version first, and then I read the proper version, and I remember reading it and being like, wait, I've already read this in 2018. So I think that's there. We'll see for sure as the series goes on. It may be something that gets more developed in like later issues. It may be something I'm completely misremembering. We'll find out together, folks. Please don't
We
tell me
sure
if I'm
will.
wrong about it. I just want to learn that on my own as we read.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
Um,
no reason to tell us if we're wrong because we'll find out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and we will acknowledge it because we
Yeah.
have what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know.
We have dignity.
That is correct. We do.
We'll use that as the word. I'm not sure that was the word I was thinking of, but it's what we're going with.
Fine.
2 issues in, Kenny. What do you think of this so far?
One of the main things that I like about it is
Yes.
that they've gone out of their way to like figure out a way to work xenomorphs into the comic so that we can see some of them.
Right. Yes.
Because like, you know, like how they tried to do that with Covenant Origins by just like, oh yeah, somebody's just like having visions. And now
Right.
that I've said that out loud, I realize that that's like kind of the way they worked it into this comic too. But like it feels different here
Sure.
because the character that's having the visions is a character we already know and are familiar with.
Yeah. But we also got, I mean, in addition to flashbacks or dreams, right, with xenomorphs in them, we also got a genuine xenomorph in issue 1.
Attack, yeah.
Attacking the probe, and a genuine face hugger at the end of issue 2. So they're not shying away from it. They are giving us plenty of xenomorph stuff in between the weird dreams, the kind of surreal aspect of it, but also like Hicks talking about Acheron, right? Like it's there, and I appreciate that too. You know, they're not dragging it out.
But yeah, to like literally answer your question, it's not bad. I'm enjoying it well enough. The one problem that it has is the problem endemic to Aliens,
Right.
in that I'm just inherently not as interested in seeing an action version of the story as I am a horror version.
Okay.
But I can't really hold that against it because that's what it is, you know? So it's not
Right.
its fault that that's the story it's
Yeah.
telling. So as of right now, I like what they're doing with Hicks. I'm interested to see where he goes.
Yeah.
Newt feels different enough that I don't want to say it doesn't feel like Newt, but I don't have as good of a handle on what they're going to do with her later
Yeah.
because she feels less like last time we saw her than Hicks does, you know?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
But I think it's cool. I like the hook of it. And even if I didn't already know that this storyline took place on Earth, the fact that there is a facehugger on Earth now implies there's going to be a xenomorph outbreak on Earth, which is something I'm extremely excited to see.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it does go pretty wild. I'm not gonna lie.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
It's I mean, you know, we're reading another good alien action story in the Marvel run, the current Marvel run, right? The Icarus storyline. And that's
Yep.
working pretty well. This is working well in a different way. Like this is a much broader view, right? We've got
yeah.
Hicks doing his thing, we had Newt doing her thing, we had these corporate suits doing stuff. We've got this Patrick Massey guy just kind of like hasn't been properly introduced to the story, but we're seeing and hearing stuff about him. It's a bigger story, right?
Yeah.
I think
sure.
it's laid out pretty well. I think it's pretty, for the most part, pretty easy to follow, even though it's jumping around a lot. And I think it's very, very well developed, and it's doing something that I like, where it's doing a lot of world building that isn't getting in the way of the story moving forward, right?
Yeah.
You know, to make another Watchmen comparison, right? You've got, you know, the Night Owl book in there, and the Black Freighter stories and all that kind of stuff that adds to the story. You don't have to read it, but you should, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you didn't stop and read all of those things about television and all of the things about the Coast Guard, and you just read the story through, it would still work. But having that information there for you to read adds to it and doesn't get in the way. Same with the Theory of Alien Propagation was a side story that like was published at the same time as this. That again is considered a part of this. It's like ancillary material. It is kind of like the you know, the stuff that we saw in the chapter breaks for Watchmen, right? Where it's like, this is supplemental and is going to build, and you're going to want to check it out. You don't have to, but you should. I like, this feels like a premium comic book, for lack of a better word, right? This isn't
there is a whole lot here, dog. It is stuffed full of things.
It is. And that's, I think, why I'm such a big fan of it, because it does so much and it gives you so much, but it's still like, it's all there if you want it. You can get really deep into this stuff, but if you just read it on a surface level, it's also still very entertaining and fun. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Rereading it now, I'm remembering like why it impressed me when I read it years ago, and why I think it was such a big hit for the fans and for Dark Horse Comics, and why they were like, yeah, we got something good here. We need to keep this train running and keep this franchise going.
That is one thing I will say. It's kind of hard for me to conjure up the perspective of somebody reading this when it came out.
Yeah.
Because like now, not only do I have, 30, 35 years of like, expanded franchise material to work with.
Right.
But like, at the time they didn't. There was the first movie, there was the second movie, and then that was it until this came out. And so it's kind of hard for me to get in the headspace of somebody that's like, seeing this come out for the first time and going, oh my God, they can continue the story outside of a movie.
Right.
That's wild, you know? And so because of that, it's kind of hard for me to picture what somebody in 1988 would think about where this comic is going.
Sure.
But as someone who's reading it now and knows that it's not really canon, but also not knowing where it's going, despite knowing that this story isn't canon, I am still interested to see where it goes,
And again, it can be canon if you choose it to be. Like
that's true.
I mean,
there's a few. This isn't the first time we've come across something in the expanded franchise that can't be canon thanks to things that were made later. Right. So
yeah, it happens. This is like the kind of thing that's right up my alley. I think I've spoken about this before. I am the kind of guy who, like, if I like something, I just want more of it. Right.
Yep.
To bring it back to Sonic, I actually, before I even played a Sonic game, I saw the cartoon, the Saturday morning cartoon, and I thought it was so cool. And then I was like, oh my God, there's another one. And it was the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon. Not good. And the games, I got like a Game Gear. I started buying the games. I started buying the comic books. Like I was in, like, because I just wanted more of it. Ninja Turtles was the same way. There was like the Archie comics. There was the movies. There was the Mirage comics, the original series. There were toys. There was all that kind of shit. And I was just here for all of it. As a kid, fucking Mortal Kombat. I do a whole other podcast that's about Mortal Kombat stuff that isn't a video game because I just wanted more of it. Like I was that guy. And so like I don't even worry about what is and isn't canon at this point anymore because everything can exist in parallel, right? It just can. And I think that they borrow ideas. I think that Alan Dean Foster borrowed some ideas from this for the Covenant Origins novel. And if he didn't, he might have been inspired by other things that did borrow ideas from this. This certainly borrowed ideas from other non-alien stuff as well, right? So like I'm totally cool with all of that stuff existing. And like I just want a good alien story. And then I want to read, and I am going to want to read some Marvel book that's going to like make some kind of a tribute to some of these ideas and be like, hey, I kind of remember where those ideas came from. This is kind of cool. I've spoken to you in private, something we haven't done on the show yet, about how I think one of the recent Marvel books makes reference to Out of the Shadows, Yeah, I'm just down for all of that stuff. So I'm just glad that there's an Aliens book out there like this that preceded everything else, but was like, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. And we're going to put a lot of effort into this. And we're going to set, I don't even think they were trying to set a template, but they did.
Yeah.
They set a template that a lot of these Dark Horse stories would follow for a long time. And I just think that that's very, very cool.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm looking forward to reading the rest of these.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in seeing where the story goes. That's for sure.
Next episode, we will be talking Aliens Outbreak, a.k.a. Aliens 1988 to 1989, a.k.a. Aliens Volume 1, issues number 3 and 4, continuing the story of Hicks and Newt and Patrick Bateman.
See, his last name is Massey.
Patrick Massey.
Patrick Nasty.
Patrick Nasty. Pew, 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 pew. That's going in the episode description.
Love it.
Yeah. But for now, I think we should get out of here. What do you think?
Sounds good to me. I don't think I have anything else to talk about these two issues.
Where can the people find you on the internet?
My Twitter handle is at CYHOBBEZ.
And the podcast is on Twitter at Crew Expendapod. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Kenny, I think we should post a link to our Instagram on Twitter as well.
Yeah, probably, and see what happens, which, by the way, our Instagram link, or our Instagram handle, rather, is at Crew Expendable Pod.
Yeah. I'm on Twitter at Final Neal, Instagram at Final Neal Retro. Check out my Mortal Kombat show, mkpodquest.com. Check out our website, crewexpendable.net. Subscribe to the show, rate us, review us, 5 stars, all of those good things. I know this isn't how we usually do the plugs, Kenny, but
Fine.
I threw off.
We're allowed to mix it up
I
sometimes.
threw off the rhythm.
Yeah, like I said, it's fine. We're allowed to mix it up.
Find a link to my Instagram on my Twitter page as well. Talking more aliens comics next episode. Until then,
Stay frosty.